ASAP Rocky's devastating news about RiRi. The city of New York glittered under a cold midnight sky. Inside a luxurious penthouse overlooking the Hudson River, the atmosphere was strangely quiet. Usually, laughter and music filled the space whenever ASAP Rocky and Rihanna were together. But tonight, something felt different. The lights in the living room were dim. Only the soft glow of the skyline reflected through the massive windows. Rocky stood alone near the balcony. His phone rested in his hand, but he wasn't looking at it anymore. He had already read the message 3 times, and every time it felt heavier. Behind him, Rihanna walked into the room wearing a silk robe, her hair loosely tied back. She had just finished putting the kids to sleep. She noticed the tension immediately. "Rocky?" she said softly. He didn't turn around. That was the first sign something was wrong. Normally he would greet her with a joke or pull her into one of his dramatic hugs, but not tonight. "Babe, you good?" she asked again, stepping closer. Rocky finally turned. His face looked pale, and Rihanna felt her stomach drop instantly. "What happened?" she whispered. For a moment, Rocky said nothing. He ran his hands over his face. "I just got a call," he said quietly. "From who?" He hesitated. "From the label and the lawyers." Now Rihanna's curiosity turned into worry. "Rocky, what's going on?" He took a long breath. "The new album." She tilted her head. "What about it?" Rocky's voice cracked slightly. "They're pulling the release." Silence filled the room. Rihanna blinked. "What do you mean pulling it?" "They say it can't come out." "Why?" Rocky looked down at the floor. "They're saying if it releases, it could destroy everything." Rihanna frowned. "That makes no sense. The fans are waiting for it." Rocky nodded slowly. "I know." She crossed her arms. "So what's the real reason?" Rocky walked toward the window again. Outside, the city lights looked distant, almost unreal. "The album isn't just music," he said quietly. "It's about us." Rihanna's eyebrows lifted. "Us?" Rocky nodded. "I wrote everything about our life, our fights, our fears, the things nobody knows." Rihanna let out a small laugh. "Rocky, you've always done that." But he shook his head. "No, not like this." Her smile faded. "What do you mean?" Rocky swallowed hard. "There's a track." He paused. "One track they're terrified of." Rihanna's heart began beating faster. "What track?" Rocky finally looked at her. "The last one." And his voice dropped almost to a whisper. "It talks about losing you." The room suddenly felt colder. "Losing me?" she repeated. "It's a story, a nightmare I had." Rihanna waited. Rocky looked away again. "In the song, something happens to you." Her voice sharpened. "Rocky, what are you talking about?" He rubbed his temples. "In the dream, you disappear." Rihanna stared at him. "Disappear?" "Yeah, and?" Rocky's eyes looked distant. "The song is about how I can't live without you." For a moment, Rihanna said nothing. Then she sighed in relief. "That's what the label is freaking out about?" Rocky shook his head slowly. "No." "Then what?" "They say the lyrics are too real." She frowned. "Rocky, it's art." "I know, so release it." Rocky finally met her eyes again. "The problem is," he paused, "the dream I wrote about? Yes? It started happening." Rihanna's breath caught. "What do you mean, started happening?" Rocky slowly reached into his jacket pocket. He pulled out a folded paper. A hospital report. Rihanna's face tightened. "Rocky, what is that?" He handed it to her. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it. The words on the page blurred for a second before becoming clear. "Test results. Medical notes." One sentence near the bottom stood out. "Further tests recommended immediately." Rihanna looked up. "What is this?" Rocky's voice was barely audible. "It's about you." Her heart slammed in her chest. "What about me?" Rocky swallowed. "Last week, when you went to the doctor." Her eyes widened. "How do you know about that?" "You left the report on the counter." She stared at him. "And you opened it." Rocky nodded slowly. Rihanna looked back down at the paper. "Rocky, this just says more tests." He closed his eyes briefly. "The doctor called me today." Her entire body stiffened. "Why would the doctor call you?" "Because they couldn't reach you." The silence felt suffocating. "And?" she asked quietly. Rocky struggled to speak. "They found something." Rihanna's hands froze on the paper. "What kind of something?" Rocky stepped closer, his eyes filled with emotion. "They don't know yet." Rihanna stared at him. "But it might be serious." For several seconds, neither of them spoke. The weight of the words hung in the air. Then Rihanna slowly sat down on the couch. Her mind raced. This can't be real." Rocky sat beside her. "I'm sorry." She shook her head. "No." She laughed nervously. It's probably nothing. Rocky nodded. That's what I'm hoping. But the album, she looked at him suddenly. That's why they want to pull it. Rocky sighed. They think if the song comes out, people will connect it to the situation. Rihanna rubbed her forehead. This is insane. Rocky looked at her gently. I never meant for the song to become real. She looked at him again. For the first time, she saw genuine fear in his eyes. Rocky, her voice softened. You're scared, he exhaled. Terrified. Rihanna reached for his hand. You don't know anything yet. I know. We'll do the tests. I know. And everything will be fine. Rocky looked at her. For a moment he said nothing. Then he pulled her into a tight hug. You better be right, he whispered. Rihanna held him just as tightly. Rocky? Yes? You wrote that song about losing me. Yeah. Well? She pulled back slightly and smiled. You're not getting rid of me that easily. Rocky laughed weakly. I hope not. Outside, the New York skyline shimmered, quietly. But inside the penthouse, the future suddenly felt uncertain. Not because of fame, not because of music, but because sometimes the most devastating news isn't the one the world hears. It's the one whispered in the quiet moments between two people who love each other. And that night, A$AP Rocky realized something he had never fully understood before. Fame could survive anything. Money could survive anything. But the thought of losing Rihanna, that was the one thing he could never survive. The rain fell softly over Los Angeles that night. Not the loud, violent kind of rain that crashed against rooftops, but a quiet drizzle that whispered across the streets like a secret the city didn't want to tell. Inside their massive hillside mansion overlooking the glittering skyline, Rihanna sat alone in the living room. The house was unusually quiet, too quiet. The children were asleep upstairs. The staff had gone home early, and the only sound came from the faint ticking of a gold clock hanging on the marble wall. Rihanna sat curled into the corner of the velvet sofa, scrolling through her phone without really reading anything. Something felt wrong tonight. She couldn't explain it, but deep in her chest, a strange heaviness lingered, a feeling that something was about to change forever. And then the front door opened. Slowly. She looked up, standing. In the doorway was A$AP Rocky. But the moment she saw his face, her heart dropped. He looked pale, exhausted, almost like someone who had just walked out of a storm. Rocky closed the door quietly behind him. For a few seconds, neither of them spoke. Only the sound of rain tapping gently against the glass windows filled the room. Finally, Rihanna stood. Rocky, what's wrong? He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he walked slowly across the room, his footsteps heavy against the hardwood floor. When he reached the center of the living room, he stopped. His eyes met hers. And suddenly, Rihanna felt fear crawl through her body. Because the look in his eyes wasn't anger. It wasn't frustration. It was heartbreak. The kind that comes before devastating news. "Ri," he said quietly. His voice cracked. She had never heard his voice sound like that before. Her stomach twisted. "What happened?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Rocky ran both hands over his face. "I didn't want you to hear this from anyone else," he said. Rihanna felt her pulse quicken. "Rocky, you're scaring me." He inhaled deeply, and for a long moment he simply stared at the floor. Like the words he needed to say weighed 1,000 pounds. Finally, he spoke. "The doctors called today." Rihanna blinked. "The doctors?" Rocky nodded slowly. "They got the results from the tests." Silence filled the room, again. But this silence was different. Heavier. Darker. Rihanna's heart pounded harder. "What tests?" she asked. Rocky finally looked up at her. And in that moment, she knew. Whatever he was about to say was going to break her world. "They found something," he said quietly. Rihanna's breathing slowed. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the couch. "What did they find?" Rocky swallowed hard. Then he said the words that made the entire room feel like it had collapsed. "They think you might have to stop performing." The words hung in the air like shattered glass. Rihanna stared at him. For a moment, she didn't react at all. It was as if her brain refused to process what she had just heard. "Stop performing?" she repeated. Rocky nodded slowly. "The strain on your voice, the pressure from years of touring, the doctors say if you keep pushing it." His voice broke again. "You could lose it permanently." The words echoed inside Rihanna's head. Lose it permanently. Her voice, her music, her life. For nearly 2 decades, Rihanna had lived on stages, under bright lights, in front of screaming crowds. Music wasn't just what she did, it was who she was. And now, that entire world was suddenly fragile, like glass about to shatter. She slowly sank back onto the couch. Her eyes stared forward, unfocused. "No," she whispered. Rocky stepped closer. "They said it's not definite," he added quickly, "but they strongly recommend stepping up away from touring for a long time." Rihanna shook her head slowly. "No, no, no." She stood up suddenly. "That doesn't make sense," she said, her voice rising. "I feel fine." Rocky stepped toward her. Listen, I just performed 3 weeks ago." Her breathing became sharper now, her chest rising and falling rapidly. "You saw the crowd." Rocky nodded gently. "I know. I felt amazing. I know. So how can they say I might lose my voice?" Her voice cracked, and suddenly, the anger melted into fear. Real fear. She turned away from him, her shoulders trembling. Rocky watched her carefully. He had known this moment would hurt. But seeing her like this, it hurt him more than he expected. Slowly, he walked over and placed a hand on her shoulder. "Right?" She didn't turn around. The rain outside grew heavier, and for a moment, it felt like the entire world had paused. Then Rihanna whispered something so quietly that Rocky barely heard it. "What if they're right?" Rocky's heart sank. She turned to face him. Her eyes glistened with tears now. "What if the one thing I love most is the one thing I can't do anymore?" Rocky pulled her into his arms instantly. "You're more than music," he said softly. "But music is me," she whispered into his chest. He held her tighter. "No," he said. "You're a mother. You're a creator. You built an empire. You changed fashion, beauty, culture. But the stage?" she said weakly. Rocky gently lifted her chin so she would look at him. "The stage will always be there. But you?" He paused. "You matter more than any stage." Tears rolled slowly down Rihanna's cheeks. For the first time since he walked in, she let herself cry. Not loudly, not dramatically, just quiet tears sliding down her face as she clung to him. Outside, thunder rolled softly across the city. The lights of Los Angeles flickered in the distance. And inside that silent mansion, two of the world's biggest stars stood together in the living room, facing a future neither of them expected. But as Rocky held her, he whispered something that slowly calmed the storm inside her heart. "Whatever happens next." He kissed her forehead. "We face it together." And for the first time since the devastating news, Rihanna took a steady breath. The future was uncertain. The stage might change. Life might shift in ways she never imagined. But one thing remained unbreakable. They still had each other. And sometimes, that was stronger than any spotlight.